I'm going to give my best example of why horrendous things happen in history, not to justify it, but to give you the factual connotation as to why it happened. One of the things that we know went on was that there were occasionally violent reactions by radicalized Muslims, just as you have radicalized Christians. And so, in certain places in history, right, different caliphates, different things in the Middle East, different things in Africa, we saw that there were people who, in fact, did kill people um, before conversion. It would be no different than when you look at the Inquisition or something like that. But the example that I often try to use for people with history is the indigenous people of Americas. When we were kids, we were told that the indigenous people scalped pioneers. This is what we were told. That they went out and they killed and they savaged um, early Americans as they traveled west. But what we're not told is that long before any of that happened, they were putting prices on heads of indigenous people. And that miscreants, murderous, evil men would ride into communities, Indian communities, and they would murder them. And most of the time, when we look at the history of it, it was when the hunters, gatherers, and warriors would not be there. And they would sell these scalps at town for money. We know this to be the fact. There are multiple, many examples of it in American history. But what we hear, what has been left with us, is the idea of the Indian scalping. You never hear the idea of a white man or a pioneer scalping. You don't hear that. What you hear is the indigenous people did it. They scalped them. And fact is that we know from all other history, from Lewis and Clark, from the first arrival of the Pilgrims here, and many other accounts, that Native Americans, indigenous people, welcomed folks here. People who stole from them when they first arrived. I've told you guys the story of the Pilgrims when they first got here, and the first thing they did was theft. But they helped these people. Desecration and theft. They went to graves of Indians who had been buried due to disease. And what they did was they stole the honorariums that were near their graves and tombs and places of honor. And they wrote about it. They documented it from their own words because they said they didn't know what it was. My point to you is when you do things to people and you radicalize them, you show them that you are just as brutal or savage and as cruel. Radicalization takes people outside of the idea of natural thought. A lot of times they just want revenge. They want to get back what you took from them equally, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And so when we see this situation with the caliphates and things that happen in Muslim history, we know that a lot of it was also because of the oppressions and things that they saw